Tell us what happened in there.
So basically, we've never worked before this judge, so Ms. Andrews and myself and the rest of the team, we wanted to meet the judge and talk to him about timeline. And that's really what we were doing, and also setting up for our access for the discovery. Because I think if you were in the courtroom, you heard they have somewhere around 235 body-worn cameras. Every officer involved in the investigation is obligated to record, their involvement, and we'll be required to review that. So we were just kind of setting up timeline. It looks like the case will go before a grand jury here either the end of June or July. And then once they indict Mr. Oropeza, then we'll come back for arraignment. And of course, at that time, he'll enter pleas of not guilty just routinely.
Have you spoken with your client?
We have, of course.
Tell us about that.
Not going to talk about that, but
Yeah.
we've talked to him, and we're working on his case.
I mean, basically, we let them know what to expect, what procedures, the format. Obviously, you all understand we're not going to discuss the particulars about, what we talk about relative to the case. But generally speaking, he has a good understanding of, what's going on and what the procedure will be from this point forward, and the time frame and things of that nature.
Talk about his general demeanor.
Concerned, for sure. I think you'll find out as this case goes on that he was an extremely well-liked
Neighbor.
person, neighbor, and had helped almost everyone that lived around him, including the family next door, the victims' families. They had an ongoing relationship and got along for a fairly long period of time. So
we've gotten a lot of, I guess, calls of support online and also to our offices. A lot of people cared about him and thought highly of him, and we're so.
It wasn't an isolated instance where, I know it was portrayed early on as just a random mass shooting. There's been an ongoing, they were friends to begin with, neighbors and friends. So it started out where he would often help them and, provide assistance because he was a tradesman. And so anybody in the neighborhood that needed electrical work or plumbing work or anything of that nature, Francisco was always made himself available. So we were unaware of this at first, and then we found out, people contacting both my office and Lisa's office, that there were a lot of people calling us in support, although they didn't understand, what could have happened to cause, such a severe outcome. But we're learning a lot more every day about that evening, and the initial story about asking him not to shoot his gun in the backyard because a baby was sleeping is probably not going to prove to be accurate. An accurate version of the events. Not saying that
nothing is ever
to
quite
justify.
that simple, right? And I think that we can use our common sense and know that as a reason is not really going to be accurate. And that's what we're finding out, is that it was not the reason. And it's much more complicated and much different a picture than that original witness statement.
I mean, their relationship. Sure. Their relationship, I believe, started to go downhill when the victim's dogs got into our client's yard and killed his wife's sheep. It started out with killing a sheep, then they had words about that, and subsequent to that, the dogs got out again and killed the chickens. Remember, this is kind of a rural area, and they had Francisco and his wife had animals in the backyard that they kept, and so the neighbor relationship started to go downhill as a consequence of those incidents.
Has Mr. Oropeza expressed any regret as to what happened?
We're not going to discuss
anything he says.
Anything that he says at this time.
How will coverage affect it, or will affect your case?
How will it affect it? Well,
I hope it'll start I guess, becoming a little more than one-dimensional.
Yeah.
Obviously, the focus at the initial outset was finding and arresting him. But beyond that, I hope that the story will be told in a more nuanced way that is more accurate. But as we gather all the evidence from the district attorney and start looking at everything and completing our investigation, we'll have much more information.
You guys thinking about any change of venue or anything like that?
At this time, that's
Too
not
early.
really on the table. Let's just say that we always consider that, but based on the locale we're in, the options, sometimes you have to watch what you ask for. Let me put it that way. And so we're very comfortable up here. We like how we've been received by the sheriff's department, by the district attorney's office, and by the clerk's office up here, all of the staff that we have to come in contact with and work with on a day-to-day basis. They've provided us access, and we've talked about procedures and how things can work more smoothly. And I wanted to address one other thing. As time goes on and we appear in court, I think as we do more discovery or review more discovery, but also continue our investigation, I think a lot more facts are going to come out. And we don't blame the media at this point, because the portrayal for this story initially was based on one of the residents of that household where the victims were found telling his version of events. And we certainly wouldn't expect him to go in any detail that would shine any kind of a negative light on his own activities. So that being said, we think as time goes on, and the media shows up and they hear what's going on in court and they follow the case, I think the dynamics will change a little bit, as far as the relationship with all the parties and how the events that occurred that day leading up to this.
Mr. Rosso, what is the challenge, especially in this case? You have a Mexican national, a person that was here illegally, that he had access to a gun, and because these incidents, prior incidents, it turns out very violent, but everybody, like you mentioned, says that he was different, he was the handyman that everybody likes. What is the challenge to
Well, it's always
represent a person with a background?
I mean, obviously we ask the public to consider all of the facts, not just hone in on the fact that he was undocumented. Look, I think early on there were some comments made by different politicians about the victims being undocumented. We look beyond that. This is everybody here just wants to do their job. He's going to get the same quality of representation from Miss Andrews and myself and Miss Funes Baker, collectively, that regardless of his status. So it's a challenge for us because of the perception by the public, and obviously you can't help turning on the TVs and see stories about current gun violence, and I think this was portrayed initially as a mass shooting in line with some other events that were occurring, and I think this is going to end up being a different kind of situation. It's still a gun, it's still a case involving gun violence, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that, but it's not just a random act from an individual who goes into a facility or a store or church circumstance and just starts shooting. There's a history behind all these parties involved.
The district attorney's office has alluded to possibly upgrading charges to capital murder in this case. Are y'all prepared for that? I mean, obviously that hasn't happened yet, but
Yeah,
No, we
that's
anticipate
completely
that.
what
Yeah.
we expect.
Yeah. I mean, we were. Let me say this: when I first saw news breaking on this case and heard that they filed 5 charges of murder, I mean, that surprised me, because this is clearly just the child being under 10. Miss Andrews will tell you, just the child under 10 itself is a capital murder. But anytime in Texas you have multiple victims or multiple complainants, the law only requires 2 complainants out of a single criminal episode would be a capital murder. So Yeah, we anticipated that. That's why we received the call. I mean, Judge Wells called me, and we spoke in length about the implications of it being a capital murder with, potential for death. And we.
Every criminal practitioner
Yeah.
that's been doing this
Yeah.
for any length of time knows that this is a capital murder case where the death penalty is potentially on the table. And so in those circumstances, you have to have certain lawyers who handle those kind of cases with specific qualifications. And so that's why we're on the case.
And-
we anticipate this.
And let
Yes.
me add, I didn't mean by any chance that I wasn't insinuating that he was charged improperly. In meeting with the district attorney's office here, they needed to move quickly, and they're not a direct file county. In other words, they can't just, bring a case to grand jury or automatically file their charges. They have procedures. Their grand juries don't meet as often. So in an abundance of caution, what they do is they want to get charges in place to hold an individual, which they did, and now they'll make their determination. In speaking with the DA's office today, they were clear. We're waiting for more of the reports to come in before we even take the case to grand jury, because they want to make sure that they seek what they believe to be, the proper indictment. And we've worked with these prosecutors before, so like I said, we will have open dialogue. They've made themselves available, and we'll continue to work together.
Do you anticipate any federal charges in connection to the illegal possession of a firearm by a undocumented person?
I don't, but that's not my call. I think right now the DA's office in San Jac County has enough on their plate to handle for a while, and I'm not sure the feds. I don't see any benefit to them pursuing a separate weapons charge. I guess
The punishment range
Yeah.
for a capital murder is obviously very severe, and it makes the federal charges, I think, pale. So I can't imagine.
I think that would be a waste of federal resources at this point, to think that. But
that would be a political decision,
Yeah.
not a legal decision. So no, I don't anticipate that.
Anything that you can share according to your client, what happened exactly that
No,
day?
no.
no, but thank you for asking.
I would imagine not in the days afterwards either, during the 4 days. Anything you can tell us?
So we haven't had the benefit yet of reviewing his statement to the police. We've, again, the district attorney's office has kind of filled us in on, some of the particulars, but we can't really comment on what he even told the police at this point.
Are y'all even able to talk to his wife? Because she's in custody, I think, over in Montgomery County.
Can't.
Are y'all able to talk to her?
She's represented by a lawyer, and so any communication that we had with her would have to go through her attorney.
And have you talked to her attorney?
I don't want to get into the specifics. Yeah.
What additional discovery will you be seeking between now and the next court date?
Well, the law says that we're entitled to all discovery. So everything that they have, we have, and I fully anticipate they're going to share everything with us.
Yeah.
These prosecutors are very above board, very professional.
Yeah.
We've known them for a very long time. So every bit of evidence that they have, we will review and get. So
And we've actually had conversations about, they're open to anything we may discover during our investigation, because they want to make a full and informed decision. So, this is not a situation where anybody's going to hide the ball. It's a very difficult case. It's an unfortunate case. It's sad. No one wins in this situation. And, you have both the DA's office and the defense attorneys trying to figure out how does a situation where people are friends, this is your neighbor, how does it get to this point? And so that's what we're working through.
but as collegial as we all are,
Yeah.
Anna and I obviously have a job to do, and we're going to vigorously and zealously represent Mr. Oropeza.
Okay.
Thank y'all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would y'all just say your names and spell them for us?
Sure.
Lisa Andrews, Andrews.
Anna Funes Baker, ANAFUNES -BAKER.
And Anthony Osso, ANTHOY OSSO. Okay.
Is there any chance anybody of you want to make a statement in Spanish?
If you can ask a question, she will. Or if you ask a question, she'll make one. Just don't. I'm gonna step
¿Qué
out of
fue
here.
lo que sucedió hoy y qué nos pueden compartir?
Lo que sucedió hoy es nada más que el juez quiere saber cómo va a proceder el caso, cómo tiempos que necesitamos. Es muy no hemos ni siquiera recibido ninguno de los reportes. El juez nos dijo que vamos a regresar en agosto. El caso tiene que ser presentado ante un gran jurado y eso es lo que estamos esperando.
Ustedes, los abogados, comentaban de que este no es el caso que se ha pintado, no es la misma versión que dicen las autoridades. ¿Nos podría explicar usted un poquito de lo que se comentó?
Hemos recibido muchas llamadas, hemos recibido mucho testimonio de muchos miembros de la comunidad sobre la relación entre Francisco y sus vecinos. Lo único que podemos decir es que las cosas no es como las pintaron, como en un principio. Hay mucho más que va a salir a la luz y es muy temprano en esta investigación para saber qué realmente pasó esa noche.
Usted decía que ellos tenían una relación, que eran amigos y que aparentemente todo empezó, las quejas, porque el animal se iba a la yarda. ¿Nos podría explicar?
Lo que sabemos hasta ahorita es que eran amigos. Francisco y su esposa tenían animales en su casa. Esos animales fueron atacados por los perros de los vecinos en varias ocasiones y eso empezó a deteriorar la relación.
¿Ustedes están listos para que esos cargos aumenten y es posible que se lleguen a cargos masivos que lo podrían llevar a la pena de muerte?
Eso es algo que llevamos preparados desde un principio, es por lo que tiene los abogados que tiene. Tiene 3 abogados, es lo que anticipábamos desde un principio.
¿Cómo está su primo?
Él está bien.
¿Preocupado?
Preocupado, claro. ¿Quién no lo estaría?
Una cosa más, si hay alguien con información sobre este caso, por favor llama los 3 con la información. Quiero hablar con alguien que tiene información. Gracias.
Gracias.
Thank you, guys.